Welcome to Review with a Brew, and a rather special edition one at that. It's not every day that you get a heritage car from Honda. Anyway, today's brew is English breakfast tea. Back in 1997, mutterings came out of Japan about this humble Civic that was no longer the family hatchback that people were used to. It had Type R associated with its name, meaning race. It had a bigger engine, it had more radical styling. This was the EK9, and sadly it never appeared in the UK. Fast forward to 2001 and the EP3 Type R was born, and this was actually built in Britain, in Swindon. It sold so well, got so many accolades and impressed so many people, it was actually exported to Japan. The EP3 was loved by all. The insurance wasn't particularly great, but people paid it because they heard how good this car was. It retailed for about £16,000, which is not very much money at all. Let me just look at the styling, look at the wheels, and the fact it's a 3-door as well. Now that's what I've noticed most about things like the FK8. All these cars are now 5 doors, but that's because practicality is built into pretty much every vehicle nowadays. It says it all, doesn't it? The fact that we've got an EK4 parked behind us, and that's our car that we picked up for 275 quid. Essentially, it was a completely new car. Completely different styling, a different engine. Instead of using the 1.6 out the EK9, this came with the K20. Naturally aspirated, 4-cylinder, and delivered 197 brake horsepower. And 0 to 60 in around 6.6. Now that doesn't sound fast by today's standards, but back then, this was going up against Ferraris, BMWs and Porsche. As I mentioned, the EP3 appeared in 2001, but our model is a 2005. It's also the Premier Special Edition too, meaning it gets a lot more than what you saw in 2001. For example, we get Recaro trend-lined seats, we get red carpets, we get red trims, we even get red Type R written on our calipers. The EK9, in retrospect, looked far softer. It was more subtle. Whereas this, they just went to town on it. Sharper angles, mesh style grille, anime style Type R, and red, the symbol of R. Bigger headlamps, and on facelift models, you even got things like projector lamps. The overall front was just far more aggressive. You even had a bigger windscreen as well. Stylish funky lights, a cross between M3 and Lexus style. Simple Type R badge, no parking sensors, no reversing cameras, no collision braking. This was all about the driving experience, and that it got spot on. The thing about a 3-door car is the front doors are so long. But that means it's nice and easy to get into. Now as soon as you climb in, you can see it's Type R. There's just a few telltale signs. Red, red, white dials. It's an interesting cockpit on a car of this age. It's full of hard plastics. Yeah, we do have the extras, such as the Momo steering wheel, also the Recaro trend-lined seats, but that's about it. Compared to today's designs, it's so different. Got your serial number down here, and things like chrome trims on your handbrake. But the one thing that stands out to me is the location of the gear stick. On the EK9, it was here. And this was such a different style, different design if you will. Back in the day, I used to drive my granddad's FSO, and that's where the gear stick was located, so it was quite familiar in a way too. And after driving this, it really works. It's short, it's nicely weighted, metal gear knob too, so it feels great in the hand. It does make you wonder why it returned to there. It was a car that offered 98 brake horsepower per cylinder. So when you add that to the frugal design and style of an interior back then, it just meant there was less weight, which meant this car handled better. And that's what I like about the era of cars around the 2090s, even 80s. Now I said no safety. It did have some safety. Got an airbag here and an airbag there. As we know, the hot hatch was born in the 70s with the Mark 1 Golf GTI, and they weren't bothered about big lavish interiors. They wanted something relatively frugal
that they could chuck around a roundabout and then go flat out down a back lane. And that's where the hot hatch grew from. And this just builds on that. I do keep mentioning how it drives. That VTEC is what makes this car. You've got electric mirrors here. I can also adjust my headlamp height. Got something in the cluster that displays my mileage, but there's no fuel computer. Weirdly, there's more storage areas in here than most cars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Headroom, ample. Legroom, perfect. And in a car like this, I want to be close to the steering wheel as well. And yes, there is actually height adjustment in the steering wheel. No reach. I love Recaros in any car, to be honest. They hold you well, they're very supportive, and they suit so well because they're in red. You've even got Recaro in red as well. And if you want, you can go for your 4-point harnesses. Everything's manual, but that's what you expected. You expected a seat you could literally lift the bar and just rug it forwards or backwards, get your perfect driving position, and then get to the important bit, driving. Interestingly, you get in the back by lifting that lever there. Now strangely, on this seat, it's here. When lifting the seat, it literally pulls the back forwards. There's no movement in the base. Time to clamber in. It's not so bad, to be honest. It's nice and light and airy because you've got a light headliner. Weirdly, it doesn't feel too dark in here. I do seem to be quite a bit forward, but I suppose that's to do with the doors. Because the doors are so long, on say a 4-door, you'd already be about here. So my knees are here, and that's quite interesting. Hard plastics throughout, no armrest, but you have a grab handle on both sides. It's very basic in here, lots of hard plastics, and it's all black as well. Black seats, but they're comfortable, and for 2 people, fine. The one thing I have noticed is legroom is a bit restricted, and as I mentioned, at 6'3", I've even got my seat closer, so I've got a better connection with the car. So yeah, not the roomiest of vehicles, but I've got ample headroom. Overall, it's just, I suppose it epitomises cars of this time. Plus, as it's a Type R, most of the fun bits are in the front. You get to look at these lovely Recaros, but in the back, essentially, it just feels like a Civic. It is easier for me to get out though. I can just literally lift this. I've also got a cup holder. The bonus of the Type R is it's essentially Civic, so you get decent boot space. Bit of a boot lip, but you've got 60/40 folding seats, and this is a decent area, to be honest. Get your weekly shop in there and some suitcases. I'll lift up the carpet, bit of wood, and a spare space saver wheel. Dropping the seats is nice and easy. Let's pull this. It's a thing of beauty. The iVTEC engine, double overhead cam, 4-cylinder, 197 brake horsepower. And it essentially is shoehorned in there, isn't it? It's not the biggest engine bay, and that looks a pretty big engine. As for the sound, wow. This will actually rev to over 8,000. And our car's done just under 50,000 miles. Welcome aboard the EP3 Type R. The one thing that people want to know about this car is how fast is it? Not 16.66, so the FK8 does it in 5.8. But back in 2001, this was going up against the likes of low-end Ferraris. And it could really hold its own. Under the bonnet, we've got a 2-litre K20 engine, naturally aspirated, so no turbocharger. We've got 197 brake horsepower, and I think it's about 180 Newton meters of torque. iVTEC. 6-speed manual short shift box. And as this is the 2005, it's got a lighter flywheel as well. essentially, this is all you need in your family hatchback to transform it into something extremely fun. Discs all round, stiffened suspension, and extremely responsive steering. Having driven the FK8, jumping in an EP3, you don't quite know what to expect. And I think the biggest thing is the suspension's a lot more forgiving in this. It's not rock hard, which means you've got bounce rather than bump, as Annabelle would say. Meaning it can be quite a comfortable driving experience. Now don't expect it to turn very easily whilst manoeuvring. Because it corners so well, it's like turning an oil tanker. There's those squeaks and creaks. So yes, I am kind of contradicting myself. I'm saying it's not comfortable, but it is. But it depends what you compare it to. If you compare it to an X5, it's not comfortable. If you compare it to an FK8 in race mode, it's the epitome of comfort. You can really chuck it around. It's far more flex than, say, the new car. Quick demonstration. This is second gear, we're at 3000. That was the VTEC and we're off. It's like a little racing car. Oh, it will just rev for fun. Up to 6,000, it's not the fastest thing in the world. But after 6,000, that's a completely different story. Now, you didn't buy a Type R if you're after economy. I mean, it will return around 30 to the gallon, which I don't think's bad. But it's not there with the, say, high 40s. Gear drops, just listen to the VTEC roar. This review, you're going to expect statements more than meaningful conversation, because bottom line is I'm just enjoying myself. It's so responsive. It steers so well, so precise, great feedback. It's just the balance, the braking, the acceleration, the steering and the suspension. The 6-speed gearbox feels great. Nice short shift, not notchy. Feels well refined. Very smooth transition between the gears as well. Now, it's not the quietest car in the cabin, but if it was, you wouldn't hear that. It's just so good. It really is, and if you keep it high up the revs, it will just rev and rev and rev. One of these on the track is a weapon. I'm at 4,500 at 40. If I dropped a second, straight onto the VTEC. And these engines are bulletproof as well. That's the thing. This car tops out 146 miles an hour, and nobody really expected that of a car, in a word, a humble Civic. It wasn't built for that. Doing 40 miles an hour, quick twitch with the steering wheel left, and it just doesn't lose its composure, just stays balanced. 5,000. Bit of torque steer. Ooh. But essentially a hairpin bridge, absolutely no problem. It's just grips. You also get road noise. I mean, yes, it does depend on the road, but it's not the most refined cabin in the world. And if you drive it normally, then it's quite a nice driving experience. Yes, it is stiffer than most, but it's, well, the Civic's just a good car. Always has been. This just has the Jekyll side to it. There's lots of things I could say. It's economical, it's roomy. But no, it's none of those things. A Type R is when you want to race Civic. And that's it. It sells itself.